Hello and welcome to the Cornish Witch podcast. I'm your host Freyja, a witch who lives in Cornwall but who isn't a born and bred Cornish maid. In today's episode, my guest is author Dr Rebecca Beattie. Rebecca is a high priestess of a Gardnerian Wiccan coven. She trained at the College of Psychic Studies in London, has a PhD in creative writing and lives on Dartmoor. With over 20 years' experience in the craft, Rebecca has published books on the topic of witchcraft and magic, including The Wheel of the Year, Pagan Portals, Planetary Magic, The Way Through the Woods, and Nature Mystics. She holds talks and workshops online in London, Devonshire, and Cornwall, along with holding masterclasses, consulting, coaching, and private tuition. Our conversation delves into The Wheel of the Year, focusing on Imbolc, or as you'll later hear it pronounced, Imbolc, a celebration marking the first signs of spring. We discuss the historical context of the wheel, its cyclical nature, and how modern pagan practices have evolved. The conversation highlights the significance of Brigid, the goddess associated with Imbolc, and offers insights into rituals, themes, and personal reflections that practitioners can incorporate into their celebrations. The episode emphasises the importance of connecting with nature and adapting spiritual practices to individual experiences. Rebecca, welcome to the Cornish Witch podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to come onto the show today. I am so pleased to have you here to discuss the Wheel of the Year and especially Imbolc.
Absolutely.
Before we get started on Imbolc, and I think just for any of my listeners who are not fully aware of the Wheel of the Year or know what it is, would you be able to give them a very sort of brief overview?
Yes.
For those who are unsure.
A very concise one, because we could go on for hours what was the Wheel of the Year. So the Wheel of the Year, if you've spent time learning about it on the internet, the chances are you'll have picked up some things that are probably not very helpful. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what the Wheel of the Year is. So in loose terms, very loose terms, the Wheel of the Year is a modern reiteration of something ancient. So in terms of our historical moments, it comes from a position in the 20th century where in 1951, the Witchcraft Acts were repealed in the British Isles, and that then enabled a lot of underground paganisms that had been bubbling away in the background to come out into the world without fear of people being imprisoned for witchcraft or, persecuted in that way that people would have been in the past. So the Wheel of the Year is something that happened when we had two, and I'm sorry to say they were both blokes. We had two male leaders in terms of, really pushing forward in the pagan world. We had the two groups that were bubbling up at the time. We had witches that were so modern pagan witchcraft, aka Wicca, which is an initiatory tradition where we are referred to as witches. We exist in covens, but we're initiated into those covens. And it's a mystery tradition. So this started with somebody called Gerald Gardner, who I will otherwise refer to as Uncle Gerald, just for friendliness sake. And then on the other hand, we also had, about 10 years after the emergence of the witches, we had modern pagan druids emerging. And I'm using that term very specifically to mean modern pagan refers to the things that were emerging after that repeal of the Witchcraft Act. So this is the first time in our history that those groups of people were practicing as a faith-based religion. Up until then, you might have had, you'd have had cunning folk who knew about spellcrafting and magic and read the books of magic and, the grimoires and the rest of it. And you may have had people that thought they were witches but weren't, had an interest in it. But this is the first time that people started to practice these things as a spiritual practice, as a religion. So basically, we have the druids on one side, you have the witches on the other. And Gerald and his druid counterpart, Ross Nichols, were both very good friends at this time. They did ceremonies together, they were in various groups together. And Ross would also borrow Gerald's ceremonial sword, which is quite a big deal. And they came together, and basically what you had on one side, the witches were celebrating the 4 kind of Celtic-y holidays. So they were celebrating, they were celebrating Beltane, they were celebrating Lammas, Samhain, and Imbolc as our 4. So that's our 4 holidays that come from a Celtic tradition. And then you had the solar holidays that the Druids were celebrating. So they had the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes that were very much about watching the signs of what was happening with the sun. Whereas the Celtic holidays have slightly different themes. And what they did was they thought, wouldn't it be good if we all did the same thing? So Ross and Gerald come up with this idea of having this cycle of 8 celebrations rather than 4 each. So we all celebrate the same 8, what we call Sabbats.
Yeah.
And every 6 weeks, the point of the Wheel of the Year is that every 6 weeks, we all pause what we're doing in modern life and we all look to nature to see what's happening there. And that's where you discover the themes of that each individual Sabbat.
And then for those who might have looked on the internet and seen information about the Wheel of the Year and the Sabbats, and then how there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. How do you view it? Do you view it as a wheel that is like consistently turning, or like more? And I know it is very cyclical as well because it's to do with how our Earth is turning. Or do you kind of view it as a traditional way, in a wheel in a traditional way, or do you see it a little bit differently, like maybe more of an orb? Or
that's a really good. I've never been asked that question before. That's a really good, well thought out question, Freyja.
Thank you.
I think so. When I was referring to the misinformation that you get online, there's a lot of misinformation about the names of the Sabbats in particular.
Yeah.
And whether or not they're ancient or not. And if you look at each individual Sabbat, most of them have ancient roots, either in prehistory. So the equinoxes were celebrated thousands of years ago by our ancestors, or they're rooted in the kind of agricultural calendar of the year that probably predates Christianity. But we have this problem with our history, which is that pre-Christianity are the ways that we celebrated in the British Isles and the traditions that we had, the religions that we had pre-Christianity weren't written down. So we've got this sort of blank part of history where there's no written records other than the records that are written by the Christian monks who were coming in, observing ancient druids doing stuff. So you have an imaginative link from us to the past. It's not an unbroken link to the pre-Christian era. It's an imaginative link where modern pagans are looking to the past for what was likely to be happening. We don't know if our ancient ancestors were celebrating the wheel as an 8-pointed cycle. My own personal experience, because all we can really go on is our own personal experience. I've been celebrating the Wheel of the Year for over 27, 28 years now. And what happens over the period of time is that each time you come round to the same Sabbath, what you find is you learn something new every year. Something's changed, something's grown. You spot a detail that you've never spotted before, or your understanding of things continually changes. So, I can say that my experiences of Imbolc in the past were very academically based because it's quite a tricky holiday to sort of connect to, and we'll probably come on to that later. But my feeling is it's a spiral. It's not a wheel, it's a spiral, because each year we go through this cycle, we're going deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's the whole point of mystery traditions. So religions that are based on a mystery is that you're it's an experiential thing. You can't tell somebody what to experience in a ritual. You can't say to them, okay, we're going to do this, and this is what you will be looking out for. Everybody's experience of a ritual is different. So, and I think the Wheel of the Year is a bit like that. So we come to this point where, Imbolc is about celebrating the first signs of spring coming. We're not in spring yet, but we've got the promise of spring that's coming. But what's happening is that global warming is happening. We've got, climate crises that are going on. And so our experiences of nature are constantly on the move. So whereas 20 years ago, I might say, we should be seeing snowdrops through the snow at Imbolc, that's not actually happening these days. We're getting a different experience in nature. So the wheel has to adapt and change and grow because our experiences are doing that as well.
I love how you said you see it as a spiral.
Yeah.
Because when I think of a circle, I see it's very repetitive. And sometimes we can get stuck in negative cycles and repetitive cycles, and then you don't learn anything if you keep doing the same thing like you've always done.
Yeah.
But with the spiral, and even though you said it's going inward and going deeper, because when you first said spiral, I thought, now are we going for an upward spiral or a downward
We could be
spiral?
going for either. What's really interesting is it could be an inward spiral, but it could always be also be an outward spiral. It doesn't have to go in one direction only. And this is one of the things that, there's a fairly infamous chant that witches do in coven meetings where I think the words of it are, we are a spiral or we're a circle within a circle with no beginning and no ending. So, there's this idea that circles are complete, but these circles don't begin and end. So you don't sort of think, right, okay, one of the bits of misinformation you'll find online is that, yes, Samhain is definitely the Celtic New Year. So we all start the Wheel of the Year at Samhain. No, that's not the case. There isn't a beginning and an end. In my tradition, we actually would probably see midwinter Yule as the start of something because it's the birth of the new year. But that still doesn't mean that the wheel has to start there, because anyone coming into this new, you could be forgiven for thinking, oh crap, I've missed this particular Sabbath. I'll have to wait until next year before I can start again. And it doesn't work like that. You can start whenever you want to. If you skip one, it's not the end of the world. We kind of get caught up in these cycles of shoulds, don't we? That we should be doing. We should be doing a ritual for every Wheel of the Year Sabbath, or we're just terrible witches. Life doesn't work like that. We don't have the ability to always drop everything. And I always think that with modern paganisms and with modern witchcraft in particular, because that's Wicca is what I do. So that's the voice I speak from. We are in a position where you sometimes coming into this new, you might think, oh gosh, I need to set time aside for my spiritual life because I need to do a ritual on this date to mark that this is Imbolc, or, I need to do a full moon ritual because it's the full moon. If those times and dates don't work for you, it's not the end of the world because, firstly, our ancient ancestors wouldn't have known that Imbolc has to fall on the 1st of February, or that the midwinter solstice is the 21st of December. They'd have been getting those clues from nature. They'd have been looking at nature for the cue as to when things happened. So if you're a day or two out, it doesn't matter. And also with Wicca, I'm saying we like the royal we, but I mean, me and my covens that I've worked with and the community that I come from all see Wicca as a kind of, we see our priesthood as a service to the community. And what happens when you do that is that you don't necessarily set time aside to do a spiritual life, because your life is your spiritual life. So, if I'm working, I'm doing that in service to my community. If I'm, particularly if you're working, I know you're working in healthcare, so am I. Those things, it comes as part of the service. Part of my expression of my spiritual life is that, personally, I would find it tricky to work in a setting that was just for profit. What I do has another purpose, and that's tied up with my spiritual life. I think that's a very long-winded answer to a question that was very simple, and I
No,
apologize.
not at all. I love a long-winded answer. I like it when we're able to sort of deep dive and explore a lot more. I've just had like so many thoughts, or sort of so many, I guess, like mini revelations as you were talking as well. It's like when you mentioned how you see the wheel of the year, and you mentioned the spiral, and then how it's like never-ending circle. And for some reason, the lyrics from The Colours of the Wind popped straight into my head. It's like, and we are all connected to each other in a circle in a hoop that never ends. And then what else popped into my head was, as you were talking about, you can choose your time depending on when the Sabbats are, and when you feel like it's the start of something. And I've always found it difficult with the Gregorian calendar and nature, because everyone goes Happy New Year and it's fresh starts and new beginnings.
And it's not New Year.
No.
We should be hibernating and just still doing the self-care stuff, not leaping about trying to start new things off. The other thing about the Wheel of the Year, part of the reason I love it, I'm a lifelong hater of New Year's celebrations. Absolutely no thing. And I wish it would just stop. Because it's the whole pressure that you're put under, to have a good time. If you're not going out for a party and having a good time, then there's something wrong with you. And personally, I'm an introvert. So the idea of going out to a big party and having a good time is not really my idea of a good time. And secondly, this thing about having to make New Year resolutions, that everybody's broken them by January the 3rd. And when I used to live in London, I used to go to the gym regularly. I was an all year round gym goer, because swimming and yoga and various other things. And what used to really upset me was that the gym was horrible straight after New Year, because everybody made a resolution that they had to go to the gym and get fit, and I have to do this. So the first couple of weeks in January, the gyms would be heaving. And then by the end of January, they'll have all disappeared and it was back to normal. So it's this thing, isn't it, that you have to make New Year's resolutions. People find it really hard to stick with them because they're not realistic about what they can do. And the point with the Wheel of the Year is that you can have a fresh start every 6 weeks. It's almost like we can say, okay, this has happened in this last period, might have railroaded me and completely taken me off into another direction that I didn't want to go in. But I've got Imbolc coming up on the 2nd of February, and I can therefore start with a clean sheet there, clean sheet of paper. So it's that thing, isn't it, that we're all put under pressure to do things that we don't really want to do. And I think the bit that, the biggest takeaway I want people to get from the way I write and the way I teach classes is stuff that just think about what it is that you want to do, what feels good for you, and do more of that rather than the things that feel bad and make you feel bad. Got enough of that.
Yeah, no,
Don't need more.
I totally agree with you and stand on what you're saying there. Absolutely. In your book, The Wheel of the Year,
Yeah.
and first of all, how I usually say Imbolc.
Yeah.
What is the proper pronunciation for the word?
The B is silent, apparently, according to one of my
Ah.
sister witches, who is very, very knowledgeable and very well
Mhm.
read. Because I always used to call it Imbolc, but
Yeah,
I've kind of got into the habit of calling it Imolc
yeah,
because that's how I've learnt it within the community. Doesn't
yeah.
really matter a whole lot, you know. It's whatever works for you.
Hmm. So it's Imbolc or Candlemas or Candlemas.
Yes.
Again, my
And Candlemas
pronunciation. Yeah.
Candlemas is an interesting name because it comes from church calendars. You
Mm.
know, it's church festival Candlemas. But the earliest coven in the initiatory tradition was the Bricket Wood Coven. That was Gerald Gardner's first initiatory group. And the Book of Shadows. So in the initiatory tradition, we have something called the Book of Shadows, which is basically the book that you copy by hand from your high priestess. So
Mhm.
each coven is run by a high priestess. You're initiated in after a period of training. And then after you're initiated in, you get to hand copy the Book of Shadows. And the Book of Shadows for the Bricket Wood tradition refers to Imbolc as Candlemas. It refers to
Right.
Samhain as Halloween. It refers to Beltane as May Eve. You know, so it had a different set of names.
Yeah.
The ones that I would watch out for, the ones that usually set hairs running within the community, are there was a not a very nice person in America called Aidan Kelly, who decided that he felt everything should have a Celtic sounding name. So he created this set of names for um, some of the festivals that are not really well researched and upset a lot of people when you use them because they're just he wasn't a nice person. He did some pretty terrible things in the community, and B, he wasn't very well thought through. So
Mm.
you'll sometimes hear people referring to Mabon, which
Yeah.
is one of the fake names. It's Mabon was a this is not for this is for autumn equinox, not for Imbolc.
Yes.
Um, but you'll see online everywhere people referring to the autumn equinox as Mabon, and that
Yeah. And
absolutely
I've done that
drives
in the past.
it drives the Wiccan community absolutely nuts. And you'll get lots of arguments online just because Mabon is a figure in Welsh mythology. It's got
Mhm.
no relation to the autumn equinox at all.
Mm.
Doesn't have any reference to Mabon in the autumn equinox celebrations. So it's one of those things that if you know, you know,
Yeah.
not to use the word Mabon in particularly online if you're interacting with the pagan community. It's the first
Yeah.
thing that will let people's, they'll start twitching at you. Um, but yes, so the names sometimes do vary. You'll sometimes see Imbolc, you'll sometimes see Candlemas. Um, Either is fine, but just
Yeah.
it's good to be aware of where the name comes from and what it actually
Absolutely.
means.
Yeah, and I love I love, what's the word? It's etymology, where names and words come
Yeah,
from. I find that very fascinating, and I think it's really
absolutely.
good to educate people on it as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so we've got 1st of February or 1st to 2nd of February in the Northern Hemisphere,
yeah,
and then 1st of August in the Southern Hemisphere.
yeah. Which
Because
is
yeah,
again, this is a fairly new thing. When modern pagan traditions started, they were only in the British Isles. This is the first time the British Isles has given birth to a religion of its own.
yeah,
Because every other religion has come in from outside. So, Christianity comes in with the Roman army when we're
mm,
colonized by Rome. But modern paganisms start in the British Isles with that repeal of the Witchcraft Act. But what's happened over time is, and this is a really good thing, not a bad thing, that those traditions have spread. So one of the first moves that happened was one of our covens initiated somebody from the United States. They then took it over to America, and it mushroomed from there. It's kind of like, it's one of the fastest growing religions in the world.
Wow.
At the moment. And it spread around the world. But what happens then, and I learnt this when I was teaching Wheel of the Year, that when I used to teach pre-COVID, I was teaching in person in London in the basement of a pagan bookshop. And I would say to my students at that point, what's happening in nature where you are? Tell me what you're seeing in nature, because it kind of starts to root us in that practice. And, you know, you'd get all the same answers because we were in a room in a basement in the same city. And then what happened with COVID is that I took the classes online because we couldn't get to the basement of the bookshop in London. And then I found that over a period of time, what was happening was, I'd say, what's happening in nature where you are, and somebody would pop up and say, oh, it's forest fire season here. The air is filled with smoke. And I'd think, where are you? And then it turned out that the Zoom revolution meant that my classes had gone international. And so people were practicing paganisms all around the world. And the reason I give the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere dates is, in the past, if you lived somewhere like Australia or New Zealand and you were trying to follow the Wheel of the Year in the way that the British witches were, you'd be thinking, but it's the middle of winter when I should be celebrating midsummer, or it's autumn when I should be celebrating spring.
Yeah.
So we have this complete alternative version which gives you the Southern Hemisphere dates and the Northern Hemisphere dates, because it doesn't make sense to celebrate Imbolc in the Southern Hemisphere in February, because that's not what nature's doing. They're not just coming out of winter, they're you know, coming out in a different period of the year. So they're coming out of their winter in August, just as we're going in.
Yeah. Which makes perfect sense. And it's making it then more accessible for wherever people are around the world who go by this faith or go by that cyclical, who work cyclically. They don't have to feel rigid or stuck, depending on what hemisphere they're in.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'll always say is, we might be celebrating snowdrops in the British Isles, but if where you live you don't have snowdrops, look at what you do have and start celebrating that, rather than wedding it to a form of nature that doesn't exist where you live.
Yeah. With Imbolc, we've got themes, and in your book you've got purification, dreams, imagination, the unconscious, and youth. The planet is the moon, direction is northeast. Tarot card is a major arcana, which is the moon, and then you've got the astrology sign is Aquarius, which I think is really lovely. Purification, dreams, imagination, and the unconscious, and youth. How can people work those in or become conscious of those during Imbolc? What can they do to
bring those in? So the reason those are there is because of pre-modern planetary magic, which is the other kind of string to my bow in terms of how I practice. So pre-modern planetary magic comes from a time where we're looking at about 4000 BCE. So this is 4,000 years before the sort of early beginnings that Christianity claims as being the start of the date range. And at that time, it's first written down in ancient Babylon, or first recorded in ancient Babylon. But this is a school of magic, or a form of magic, that goes through from ancient Babylon to ancient Egypt. It then travels to ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Sorry, reverse those. So it goes to Greece, then Rome.
Yeah.
And then it spreads across the world. And it's a form of magic which basically works on a worldview that was then eradicated with the coming of the modern era. So 1700s, 1800s, pre-modern planetary magic starts to retreat because our science tells us the universe isn't built in the way that our magical ancestors thought it was. So we've got this period where huge period of human history where our ancestors would have been standing on planet Earth, looking up at the heavens, watching the movement of the stars, and they thought that we had two luminaries that ruled the universe. We've got the sun and the moon, because they didn't realize the moon was a satellite and that it reflected sunlight. They didn't realize that the sun is actually a star, not a planet. And they then see that there are 5, what they refer to as the 5 wandering stars. So you've got the constellations that stay in their formation, but these 5 planets that then move around randomly. And what happens with modern pagan witchcraft is that, and this doesn't happen in every coven, but in my tradition, so the Brigid tradition, we have this thing where we map the ancient pre-modern planetary magic planets to the wheel of the year. Okay. And it's so for Imbolc, we're using the moon as our planetary reference. And when you're looking at moon magic in the ancient way that it was performed, what moon magic governs is things like purification, dreams, imagination, the unconscious. It's that sort of unconscious stuff that we're bringing to the surface. So for those of you that are tarot readers or tarot users, the moon card in the tarot is a really good example of this, that it represents what's unconscious that you're bringing to the surface to reveal. And that's the kind of themes that we look at Imbolc, that we have the plant life that's been under the surface of the world all through the winter. We've had those plants didn't die and disappear. They were just sleeping under the surface. And what's happening at Imbolc is they're starting to come back up. So the daffodils and the snowdrops and the crocuses are starting to emerge from the earth and reveal themselves again. Yeah. So in terms of practicality, we often, for Imbolc, the themes that you might get happening in ritual in a coven is that we start bringing in those kind of ideas about what's unconscious that we need to bring to the surface. What do we want to make space for, and what do we want to let go of? So we have these cleansing rituals that we do. In the book, I give an example of using a salt bath as a cleansing ritual, because witches use salt as an energy cleanser in the way that Native American folk might use white sage smoke, witches use salt and water. So we can use that as an energy cleanser, and it's a way of, I guess, we're coming to the end of winter. If we think about where we are, we're still in the cold. We're still in a period where we've come out of deep hibernation or deep kind of, through the winter, hopefully people have been able to slow down a bit and just honour the fact that winter requires a slower pace. But at Imbolc, we're not out of winter, but we've got the promise that spring's starting to come. So we've got that starting to emerge from the darkness. We've gone through midwinter, the daylight hours are starting to lengthen again. And so we're not out of the woods, but we're starting to think about coming out of the woods. So we start to think about, what is it that you want to manifest in your life for the next few seasons? What is it that you want to start to bring about? We might banish and purify the things that we want to let go of. So it's a good time to, have that burning ritual in a cauldron where you chuck your things that you want to let go of.
Yeah.
It's also a good time because we're still quite sleepy, aren't we? We're still,
Oh gosh, I
those of us
am.
that yeah.
Yeah.
So if we're spending more time sleeping, which is absolutely natural, you might want to do things like dream diaries at this time because that's
Yeah.
another lunar related activity. I have an issue with dream diaries and I'm putting up my hand to claim ownership of being a crap witch on dream diaries because I cannot remember the period between being awake enough to record what you dreamt and
Mm.
asleep enough to remember what it was you were dreaming. I'm just
Yeah.
that period doesn't work for me. So dream diaries are no good for me at all. So over time, what I've done is I've adapted that idea so that I have a daydream diary instead.
Oh,
So when
lovely.
if I let myself drift off and just have a bit of a stare at the clouds and let things come to the surface, which is a very lunar activity, letting stuff come to the surface is very moon related. And you can have a daydream diary instead where you start recording the things that you're preoccupied with or the things that you're thinking about.
Hmm. I love that idea. I've never heard of that before. And it's nice that you're honoring your daydreams as well. I'm a Pisces, and I'm a
Yeah.
second deacon Pisces. So I'm like really in like Pisces. And I was always told, Frey, get your head out the clouds, like when I was a child, stop daydreaming.
Do the things that come naturally to you. I'm Aries, so technically I should be fiery and assertive and all of that kind of thing. But I have my Mercury is in Pisces, which
Mm,
basically means my communication style is Pisces style. So it's very drifty and under the surface,
mhm.
and I kind of think the point of the witchcraft path is not to conform with everything you're told you should do,
Yeah.
but instead to honor what you are. So if
Mm.
you're a daydreamer, great. Don't stop trying to be a daydreamer. Start trying to work out ways of working with those qualities positively rather than beating yourself up for them.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a lovely way to look at it because I think society and your parents and your teachers as you're growing up, it's always get your head out the clouds. And actually, I like being in the clouds. It's
Yeah.
nice
But
there.
being in the clouds is a lovely place to be. So
Yeah,
why should we change that?
exactly. Yeah. I'm definitely going to take that on board going forward. And a daydream diary sounds absolutely lovely. So I really, yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to be taking on, and you've inspired me to do. So thank you so much for that. That's really, really nice. Can we talk a little bit about the history of Imbolc and where it comes from, where the word originally comes from, and sort of a bit more of the history behind it with the Celtic side of things?
Sure. So Imbolc is one of those ones where um, it's one of the festivals that's less ancient than
Mm.
some of the other ones. So it's really that's a really interesting question. So Imbolc has got its roots in Celtic traditions, which obviously, if we're Cornwall based, Devon based, it's worth just making a little detour into the Celtic history that basically Devon and Cornwall used to be one tribe. We were one tribe of Celtic folk who spoke the
Mm.
same language and had the same traditions. And with the sort of incoming of the Saxon armies, we were pushed further west, further west, further west, and then some folk went across the Tamar into the sort of further into Cornwall. Some folk went overseas. So originally, we have Imbolc has its roots in Celtic traditions, so it is one of the old Celtic holidays, even though you might not necessarily encounter much of this online. The difference with Candlemas, so when the church comes into, so thinking back in our history timeline, about 300 CE is when Christianity comes to the British Isles, and it comes because the Roman army who had colonized Britain for many, many centuries was converted to Christianity around that time. So they then start to spread Christianity across the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And Candlemas, one of the reasons for some of the church holidays, it's part of the colonial model of how to. So if you want to be a colonizer, there are a few things that colonial powers will do. One is that they will eradicate the culture and the religion and the music and the storytelling of the countries that they're colonizing, or they'll absorb them into their own and present it as a new version. So, one of the reasons that churches are often built on pagan sites is for that reason, because what they were doing was colonizing and saying, okay, you once celebrated this religion. We're introducing this to you, which is a slightly different religion, and we're all going to do the same thing from now on. And it's a mark of colonial power to eradicate a pagan site and build a church on it, because there's domination there. There's also taking over and absorbing into your culture what's ancient and what's new, and repackaging it to say, look, this is much better than what you used to do. So we have Imbolc, sometimes referred to as Candlemas, because the church put their holidays on top of the existing pagan holidays that were there and absorbed them. And we have, so there's lots of different stories that you might hear about Imbolc and Candlemas, but the one that the pagan community, the ones that the initiatory traditions celebrate, is the story of Brigid, or Breed. You might hear her called Breed.
Yeah.
And I find when I started paganism, one of the things I found really hard to relate to was Imbolc, because the major theme of it is Brigid. It's Brigid, who was basically a Celtic goddess who got absorbed by the church and transformed into a saint. So we have Brigid of Clare is the same thing as Brigid or Breed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this you have to kind of tease out with Imbolc some of the links that have been taken over by the Christian calendar, some of the things that predate it. And in this case, when we're talking about the Celtic traditions, we're thinking wider than just Devon and Cornwall, the people of the Dumnonia, which is who we were. We were the people of the hills.
Mm-hmm.
And the other Celtic traditions, so you have in Celtic history, you have the major areas of Celtic peoples were Devon and Cornwall together, going up probably as far as Glastonbury originally.
Yeah.
And then you have Wales, and then you have Scotland, the Isle of Man, and you have Ireland. So those are the five main Celtic sort of centres of tradition. And Brigid comes from, she's part of the Irish tradition. So if your Celtic focus is on Devon and Cornwall, which mine is, sometimes it can feel a bit like, but she's Irish. I'm not celebrating the Irish tradition. I want to celebrate my tradition. But what we find is that in the push to get rid of the Celtic peoples, we lose our languages because people stop speaking Cornish. It's now it's horrible, but they refer to it as a dead language because there's no native speakers left. It's a revival language. It's not one that sort of still exists in family homes in the way that it does in Wales. But we also lost all of our deities. So one of my big drivers is noticing that we lost our Celtic gods in Devon and Cornwall. They've all disappeared. They were all absorbed. But we're starting to think about how do we rediscover those. And with the Celtic traditions, our deities were often, so if you look at the whole of the Celtic tradition, goddesses and gods tend to center on things like aspects of the landscape that that you really are, that resonate for you in some way, or rivers, or hills, or some feature of the landscape that really resonates. So, for example, the River Tamar, which is the river that separates Devon and Cornwall now,
Yeah.
is Tamara. People are starting to talk about Tamara again. And it's those are the places that you would have had gods and goddesses before. We've got no way of knowing who those gods and goddesses were. So it's important to understand that what we'd be looking for is to recreate a Celtic tradition of our own, using what we know now and being inspired by the ancient people. So it's kind of like, okay, you probably have the Tamara. You also might find with, if we take Brigid as a blueprint, then what are our Christian saints? Who were they? What happened to them before they were made Christian saints? Were they celebrated in Celtic traditions as well? So those are the places we kind of look to for our lost gods.
Yeah.
But Brigid is a really good example of a goddess who, when you look at her, she's so rich in terms of what she rules over, because she's the goddess of smith crafting. She's interesting because she's a goddess of fire and water simultaneously. So she is a goddess of roads, of sacred springs, of fires. So she rules over things like smith crafting. So if you're a blacksmith, she's your patron deity to look to. She's also the patron deity of poets as well. So she's one of her titles is she whom the poets adore, which I always think is lovely. So it's one of those things where with pagan theology, sometimes we have to kind of read our way into it. And sometimes it's about experiential things that are happening to you when you're in the landscape. There's a balance that you have to strike between what's experiential, what's your personal experience of something, and what you can find written about, and then you kind of find a middle ground. So I started feeling quite alienated from Imbolc when I was younger. But when I start thinking about Imbolc as being a lunar festival, we've got Brigid there, she's the poetry queen, she does all sorts of things. You start to find aspects to the festival that you can relate to that make it more meaningful for you.
Absolutely. What could witches, spiritual practitioners, those who are getting into the craft, what could they do to celebrate Imbolc or Brigid? I know that there's the Brigid's cross. It starts off a square and comes out into a really lovely cross. Or if some practitioners want to decorate their altar or their sacred space, how could they do that for Imbolc?
So there's two approaches that you can take, really. One is to go for the lunar aspects, and one is to go for the Brigid aspects, or you can just combine the two. So with Brigid, she is, if we go back to the original question, which is what's happening in nature where you are now?
Yeah.
Because I always think whatever we're doing, if we bring it back to what's happening in nature, it gives us an immediate entry into the festival. And so lambing season is starting about now, isn't it? That we've got in the agricultural calendar, we have fields being ploughed between the winter solstice and through to the Imbolc period. So you might start ploughing your fields. You might be really tied up with lambing. Milk is a theme. So for this festival, because of the sort of coming of the baby animals, we've got milk being a theme, which is very lunar. You get that lovely white colour. So I would be, if I was doing the celebration of Imbolc on my own, because there's kind of two approaches always. There's if you're doing it with friends or a coven, or if you're doing it on your own, there are sort of, it can feel like two very different ways of doing it. But I might create an altar at this point to Imbolc that might involve breed, or it might involve those aspects of the agricultural calendar. So I might have some wool on the altar. I might have a dish of milk on the altar. And dishes of milk are really good for if you want to do divination and you're not somebody that is, massively into tarot. You could scry. Scrying with a bowl of milk is a really lovely way of doing it, because if you set yourself up with a dish of milk, a candle to one side, and some food colouring or ink, and you basically light the candle and drop a drop or two of ink or food colouring into the milk, and don't stir it, just let it move in its own way. And scrying is basically, it's quite misunderstood in the witchy world, but we think we should be getting sort of like a film showing of something that we're going to see. It doesn't work quite like that. Scrying is a bit like daydreaming. It's a bit like doodling, where you allow your unconscious to take control and just see what images, what thoughts, what feelings come to the surface. And those are the bits that you pay attention to. So scrying is a lovely thing to do on your own or in a group. Do it with a group of witches as well. In terms of practical, I always think witchcraft, we're crafters. I am. I want to do crafts for the festival, so I don't want to just do passive things. So crafting ideas would be things like, so this week, call me sad, this week I have been doing things like making cream cheese from scratch and making butter from scratch.
That sounds amazing. Like, I wouldn't call that sad at all. That's incredible.
It's something I used to do years ago. I did it in my early years as a witch when I was trying to get my head around what Imbolc was. And it's a really good way of, it's funny because I've only just, as I've said it, thought, oh yeah, it's Imbolc. That's why I'm drawn to doing these things. But yeah, you can make butter from scratch and you can make cream cheese from scratch really easily.
Yeah.
But those are the things where I think that's an expression of our spiritual practice. It's not just a handicraft. It's also part of our expression of who we are as witches. So yeah, those are the things I would say.
What about rituals or blessings for Imbolc?
So Brigid she's the goddess of the sacred springs.
Yeah.
This is where we get into a slightly controversial topic, i.e. Clutes, which I absolutely loathe with a passion, because to me it's just litter. You're going into nature. So, for those of you that haven't come across Clutes, I think you must have come across them because, hell, we're in Cornwall. You can't go to a sacred spring without falling over Clutes or something. But it's this practice of, tying a ribbon to a tree.
Yeah.
What bugs me about Clutes is people will tie like nylon ribbon to a tree or plastic ribbon to a tree. And I'm just like, this is nature. Please don't pollute it with your, nasty plastic things. So I kind of think, Clutes, you can do it. You can, but either take it home with you afterwards or use something natural, and don't tie it so tight that you're stopping the natural growth of the tree.
Yeah.
But yes, you could go to a sacred spring. You could go out to a river that you know or a stream that you know. My favourite way of working with springs and in ways that we're trying not to pollute things is to do something like pick a leaf. So you could take evergreen leaves. So, ivy leaves or something like that.
Yeah.
Pick a leaf for every intention that you want to set for Imbolc, or every request that you're making, or, whatever it is that you want to put your focus on. And take those to a stream or a river and, put them into the water, because you're not polluting, because you're putting leaves in. It's a natural thing. So rather than tying cluties, I would probably use leaf wishes you can even write the word of the thing that you're asking for onto the leaf, and then let that go into the river if you want to.
I
Or
absolutely love
cleansing.
that. Yeah.
Or cleansing, if you are a wild swimmer, go and have a dip and dedicate it to Brigid or whoever your patron deity is that you work with, whether that's just Mother Nature or has a name. Having a dip and dedicating it to somebody sacred is another way.
Yeah, I applaud anyone who is brave enough to go wild swimming this time of
Yeah,
year, and I know it's very good for you.
it
But,
is, but, we also have to be really mindful of pollution now, that,
yeah,
a lot of our rivers and seas are really badly polluted. So, I always think there's so many dangers with wild swimming. I am a swimmer, but had a really bad experience a few years ago where I got blood poisoning from swimming somewhere that was polluted.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
so I do say to people, do it with caution, not just because of the cold, but because of
Mm,
what you're swimming in. Just check where you are swimming before you do it.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I know that you're an avid, journaler, you love to journal,
Yes,
and you've been
yes.
doing it for most of your life,
Embarrassingly, since I was 11, when it was all about what boy I fancied at the time,
oh,
or you know,
I think it's wonderful that people are able to, what is the word I'm looking for? Chronicle their not chronicle what is it chronicle? Not chronicle,
yeah,
yeah, I suppose chronicle and, um, write about their lives from
yeah.
I think it's absolutely it's storytelling, which is lovely. What sort of journal prompts do you use for Imbolc?
That's a really lovely question as well. I would, I would be thinking about, so for me, the other thing about journaling is that I've got a terrible memory. I'm really bad at remembering things. So often I journal because I want to keep a record of something and not forget things. And I do forget a lot of things. So the thing with journaling is that we are employing our unconscious mind. So I don't know if all of you know about the differences between the conscious mind and your unconscious mind, but
Yeah,
the conscious mind is the side of you that does logic and thinking and words, and the unconscious side of you is the magical part that we often forget about, but it does the really clever stuff. So our unconscious mind is the one that does um things like dreaming, like, all the moon related stuff. So it's the unconscious, the dreaming, the magic, the learning, the really clever. If you want to do a spell, it's your unconscious mind that's doing the work there.
yeah,
Um, so the reason I love um, journaling, for many other reasons, but also for my spiritual practice, is that what you're doing over time as you keep writing is that you're starting to allow things to come to the surface. So you're
mhm,
allowing yourself to communicate with your unconscious mind. Your conscious mind and your unconscious get into rapport with each other. And you'll know when that's happening because you're in a flow state. So you lose time, you get absorbed in what you're doing, and things start to work magically. So with journaling for Imbolc in particular, we're thinking about new beginnings. We're thinking about seeds being planted, new ideas being born and being birthed into the world. So those are the kinds of prompts that I'd be looking at, is reflecting over what's been stirring under the surface in winter that you're ready to now bring into life, that you're now ready to bring to the surface. And how can you honor those cycles that we all have, that we all need to pay attention to, of rest and growth. So what you don't want to do is sort of burst into, right, it's spring now, we have to be really energetic, because we're not yet. We're not there yet. So, you have to still honor those cycles of growth and rest as we're moving towards spring.
Yeah.
And also with Brigid, she's the goddess of light as well, and fire. So it's thinking about, how can you bring more fire into your life? And fire is the element of creativity.
Yeah.
So what is it that you want to make vibrant and strong and create in your life
Yeah. Yeah.
this time?
Yes, that passion, that spark.
Yeah.
Very quickly, have you ever heard of, I'm sure you have, Neville Goddard?
Yes.
Yes, and he's, 'cause I like, listening to some of his stuff and how he talks about, some of the things that was recorded by him, how he talks about the unconscious mind and
Yeah.
working on the unconscious mind to make things a reality for you. I find him very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very interesting. Just to finish up, you talk about in your book with Imbolc about making space and letting go, and you also talk about the different cultures around the world that also celebrate this time of year. With
Yeah.
Chinese New Year coming in, and we're finishing
Yeah.
Snake now. The horse is going to come galloping in.
Yeah.
Talk about uh, Hinduism as well, Vietnamese, and in Japan, and how they celebrate this time of year.
Yeah.
And you just put a really lovely thing saying, around the world, Imbolc is a time of letting things go and of creating an open and receptive space for inspiration. So let's
Yeah.
turn to an act of your own that is built around the idea of cleansing past hurts,
Yeah.
which
My
is lovely.
my favorite one is that one I was talking about with the leaf.
Yes.
Um, and because it's Imbolc and we're talking about spring, there's a particular walk where in the last place I lived in, which is in the southwest, I'd had a walk where I went over a bridge over a gorge, and my one of my favourite activities was to pick a leaf for every past hurt.
Mm,
And as you're walking, whisper to the leaf what it is you're asking it to represent. And so I would kind of gather a whole load of leaves as I was walking, get to this bridge, whisper to each leaf what it represents, and then throw it into the river, throw it into the water. Um, and one of the things that you have to be ready to is to really let go of those things, to kind of acknowledge that we will have learnt something through the past hurt, but you don't have to hold on to the past hurt to hold on to
yeah.
the learning.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's
My
been an
absolute
absolute
pleasure.
it's been a pleasure having you.
Oh,
I'm just it's been an honor really, because I absolutely love your work, and I'm so happy that you agreed to come on and have a chat with me. Your book, The Wheel of the Year, it is
yeah.
available through your website along with all
Or
of the,
any good independent bookseller.
as I
So,
say, any independent bookseller. I always
yeah,
say Black Cat Books in
exactly.
Launceston.
Black Cat Books in Launceston. We've
Yeah,
got also
the buyer.
Kate's Brew Books down
Yeah.
in Cornwall as well. There's lots of really fabulous independent bookshops throughout Cornwall. I would
Yeah.
say go and support them. You can buy it from the evil online seller,
Hmm.
but
We sh
if you
who
can
shall not be
support
named.
your exactly. But if you can, can celebrate one of the local indie bookshops,
Yeah.
then I'll always say get it from them if you can.
Absolutely, and I hope that my listeners, for those who are beginning their spiritual path and their spiritual journey, I hope that they can take away some really lovely things that they can do for Imbolc, um,
Yeah.
this year. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and being here today. And I would really love to have you back on when the
Yeah.
wheel turns to discuss
Yeah.
another Sabbath with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And what I will do is I will link your website and your socials in my show
Yes.
notes. so my listeners can go and have a look at your website and follow you online as well. I know you do some lovely lectures with the Meet Us at Llanstefan ladies. So any events that are coming up, I will
have a
also
look
link
at,
as well.
absolutely. The Meet Us at Llanstefan website has the events as they come up on there.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you a blessed Imbolc, and I'll actually see you at Meet Us at Llanstefan, because I'm going to be there for your planetary magic lecture, which I'm really looking forward to.
Fab. Look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much.
You too.
It's been so lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope you all enjoyed listening to my conversation with Rebecca. It was such an honour to have her on the show, and I really hope I can have her back on the show to discuss the next Sabbath for when the wheel turns again. If you would like to have a look at Rebecca's work, I have linked her website in the show notes, along with the books that she has published. I would highly recommend getting her book, The Wheel of the Year, if you want to learn more about the Sabbats and how to celebrate them. I did go to her lecture on planetary magic, which was all about the moon. And as my regular listeners will know, I love the moon, big fan, think she's amazing. And the lecture that Rebecca did was incredible. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you are interested in going to see when she's talking next, I will link that in the show notes as well. Okay, and now on to our Witch Weekly events, where I let you know what witchy or spiritual events are happening in and around South Devon and Cornwall, starting with local covens that are seeking new members. So if you're a solitary witch looking to join a coven, this might be for you. With us again is Ros and Booker, one of Cornwall's longest established covens, and they hold meetings in North Cornwall and the Devon-Cornwall border. Applicants are welcome to introduce themselves via email and can visit their website for more information. Rebecca, who is the mother priestess of the Temple of Cornwall, she joined me on episode 10 in season 1. She runs the temple's mystery school, and she is starting to accept new students for her sister and later on priestess of Cornwall training. This opens on the 1st of February. I've linked the website in the show notes along with Ros and Booker's information as well. The Cunning Grove is a witch, occult shop and temple based in Plymouth. They currently hold the Coven of the Sacred Grove. They are a diverse group of witches from different paths that come together to learn and support each other. With their coven, they break the year down into 4 seasons. Season 1 is looking at runes, Ogham, and magical languages. Season 2 looks at magical herbalism. Season 3 is trance work and otherworldly travel and flight. And Season 4 looks at magical charms. The Physical Coven meets on Tuesday and Thursday nights fortnightly. They also have an online coven with spaces available too. Everyone is in a group together each week, and sometimes they drop different techniques and teachings from PDFs, slides, and videos. Joining the coven comes with a range of benefits too. You can get money off on the shop and services, and you can also make use of the Coven Library, which is for local members only. To join the physical coven, it's £30 per person, and if you wanted to join the online coven, that is £15. If you would like to get in touch, you can message them through their Instagram page or Facebook, and I've also added their email address in the show notes. The physical coven does have 3 spaces left. However, they have had a lot of interest and they are thinking of starting up another night for people that can't attend Tuesdays or Thursdays. So there is possibility of more spaces coming up. If you run a coven or hold a sister circle in Cornwall or South Devon and you're open to having new members join you, please let me know and I will give you a shout out on the next episode. Witchy and spiritual events. Continuing with the Cunning Grove, they also have some events coming up. So their usual Saturday morning Witch and Brew is continuing. It used to be called Witch, Bitch and Brew. However, it's now been shortened to Witch and Brew and has more of a teaching focus. Essentially, it's a social with tea and talk. That's Saturdays at the Cunning Grove from 11 a.m. until the last witch leaves. The Cunning Grove are also holding a Witch and Stitch on Wednesdays. It's a weekly crochet, knitting and a witchcraft session, and both of these are free. And finally, the Cunning Grove are also holding a free Imbolc ritual this Saturday, and this will be at around the time of Witch and Brew. Over to Liskeard now, and on Thursday, the 5th of February, Megan Field is holding her Sacred Kerno Circle. This is around Imbolc and Brigid. It's 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. Join Megan for an in-person women's Imbolc circle where you will do a deep dive into the goddess Brigid. Together you will explore her stories, her powers, make your own Brigid's cross, and experience Brigid's fire blessing. I've linked the website in the show notes so you can book a space. The Cabinet of Folklore and Magic down in Falmouth are holding their tarot readings on Saturday mornings. And finally, an evening of psychic and mediumship readings is being held at the Holsworthy Golf Club in South Devon. This will be on the 30th of January at 7 p.m. Food, raffle, bar, gifts and stalls will be there as well. Tickets are £10. I have linked the Facebook information in the show notes, along with the telephone numbers you can call to book your ticket. Thank you so much for listening to the Cornish Witch Podcast. This podcast is an independent personal project created outside of my professional life. It exists as a space for conversation with witches, spiritual practitioners, and those walking their own paths, sharing lived practice, ritual, experience, and folklore often rooted here in Cornwall and the land itself. If you value these conversations and would like to support the continuation of the podcast, there is a voluntary link in the show notes. Listening will always remain free and there is no expectation to contribute. Whether you support here, listen quietly, or carry these stories onward by sharing them with others, thank you. Your presence honours the craft and keeps these tellings alive. May these stories find you when they are meant to. And until next time, may the path rise to meet you.